Welcome to this week's episode of Spillin' the Scoop with Papa Zoop. We are coming to you live from Zoom once again. We got Alex Yoga Mutz, Guidi Zupancic here in Nashville, Tennessee. We got Papa Zoop coming to you up in Indianapolis, Indiana. And we have the man that Burt Reynolds and Tom Selleck have been told they look exactly like in Barry Krauss. We're excited to have you guys here today. It's going to be a blast. Let's get after it.
Great, man. How are you?
I couldn't be better. And Alex is there. Alex is also from Chattanooga. So you guys have Chattanooga stories later on that you can tell each other. You'll be the only ones that can understand them. And but it's been a long time since I've seen you. You haven't changed hardly at all. You look great. How the heck did we get older?
I don't know, but you look great too, Zoop. You've been a big part of my life, and I'm honored to be on this show, Alex, and John and Zoop. It's great to see you guys.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you. Thanks for joining us.
And Barry, let's talk about how we met, because we were talking a little bit before we came on here on some of the fun times. But when we met, it was right when the team first moved to town. We were in a little grade school over off of 56th Street, and the weight program was let's just say it had left something to be desired. The only reason there were weights in there is because Jim Irsay liked to lift weights.
Yeah, no question about that. I got drafted by the Baltimore Colts in 1979, played 5 years there, and we had no weights. You couldn't even see a weight room because nobody really even cared about lifting weights. So it came over on the Mayflower in 1984, in fact, March of that time, and we commandeered Fall Creek Elementary School over there.
Yeah.
And I just remember, I don't know if it was the first year that you came in or the second year, but you kind of rolled up in this little Ford Fiesta. And for fans out there or people out there that don't really understand how big Zoop is, I got to give you an idea. When he came and saw me, it was like this Hulkamania. I mean, the guy had think about this. He had like a 62-inch chest and a 26-inch neck and a head. I mean, this like a commercial toaster.
I mean, look at it.
Yeah, so he
Wait.
shows up, and I'm like, who is this guy in this little rinky-dink car? And the next thing you know, he becomes the weightlifting coach for the Indianapolis Colts. And I'm like, weightlifting? We have now a weight program or whatever. And so I just remember when he came in, I mean, we had no weights. This off-season programs in the NFL at the time were on your own. We didn't have a lot of things at that time. We didn't have free agency. It was just interesting time. It was a kind of wild, wild west. And Zoop was able to, as you can attest to, you got hired by Frank Kush. You came in and started a program, started buying weights and stuff, and really nobody even participated. I remember you asking me, Barry, can you come in and start lifting with me? I'm like, okay, I'm not a big lifter, but I'll lift with you. And so we started lifting, and you became the official Colts weightlifting coach, and did a phenomenal job starting it off.
Well, and then Frank Kush flipped the switch on it real quick and made it mandatory. All of a sudden, I had a bunch of participants because nobody wanted to pay those fines.
No, none of them, and a lot of them. Like I remember just trying to drag them in. Like Chris Hinton, I know you got to remember this story. Chris Hinton, we had traded for him in '83 for John Elway. He walked on by the weight room, and you yelled at him and said, hey, Hint, come on in here and lift. And he goes, no, I don't lift. He goes, no, come on in here and lift. So he laid down without warming up, and he benches 500. Zoop goes, that's good. You're good. You don't have to do anything more. But there's some naturally strong guys in there. But, you were a big part of my career. When you want to talk about it, how it was a huge breakthrough with my career. And that's how you and I became close, and we did so many good things together. But you helped me at a really critical time of my career.
Well, let's go backwards first a little bit. Alex, this guy, he's played for some legendary coaches. He mentioned Frank Kush. Frank Kush was a famous coach out of Arizona in college, and then you played for Bear Bryant. So it doesn't get any more legendary than that. Talk a little bit about those times. How I've watched your YouTube video where you had in the Sugar Bowl where you had the goal line stance, and that's part of why your face is flat in the front. You had to put your head in there.
Yeah.
and stop that score from happening. So
But,
talk about playing for Bear Bryant.
okay, well, I grew up in a place called Pompano Beach, and at one time our nickname's called the Bean Pickers. I mean, this whole country little place just north of Fort Lauderdale, not far from the beach. And a good friend of mine was a wide receiver, Eddie Blankenship. We used to throw the football down at the beach, and I didn't realize he's from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and was an Alabama fan. So when I was in high school, toward junior and senior year, I started getting all this publicity and stuff. And back then, it wasn't any kind of, internet communications or anything. It's just word of mouth. And so I remember him introducing Alabama football because Alabama ran a wishbone. We'd run the wishbone as a quarterback. You fake in the line of scrimmage and you pitch. It's an option type of offense. Right. And all of a sudden I became an Alabama fan. Well, Florida was at my practices, Florida State, Auburn, all these schools were there watching me, offering me scholarships. And Alabama came in kind of toward the end. And it came down between Georgia Tech, the Rambling Wreck, because I liked architecture, and Alabama. And I picked Alabama. And when I got up there, I really kind of was shocked because I was an out-of-state guy. Alabama really recruited heavily in the state of Alabama. There was not really too many guys that they would travel around. Florida, we only had 3 players from Florida come in that year and so forth. And I just remember looking over at the Alabama Crimson Tide and looking at those linebackers because I was a linebacker. And I said, oh, my gosh, I'm never going to play here. I said, these guys are good. I mean, I don't know why I even thought that I was even capable of playing at Alabama. So I got in my first year, and it was basically I was a blocking dummy. And literally I was. I'd wear a thing called a zoot suit, and it was like a catcher's vest all the way down. And it would loop around my neck, across my shoulder pads. And in Tuscaloosa, it would be almost 150 degrees out on the AstroTurf, and we did not have water breaks. Coach Bryant did not believe in water breaks. So guys would fall out, and they would almost die, heat strokes and everything else, and we just kept on going. And I remember one of the tricks of playing at Alabama, if you wanted water, was to call the trainer over, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Jim Goosetree. He was the trainer at Alabama, and I swear he was a drinking buddy of Coach Bryant. I don't think he knew anything about medical anything. So I'd go, hey, Coach, I feel like I'm going to pass out. And he goes, oh, okay, son, go on over there to the bucket. Say, we had a bucket, and it had a towel in it, and it had a little bit of ice in it. And that's all the water that you could see. And so you would take the towel and put it over your head. It would revive your body. And the rule of thumb was don't look in the pot because it was nasty water, because I wasn't the first one that day to put my head in there or whatever. And as you look around, hopefully no coaches would look, and you'd suck the water out of the towel. But that was how we got water. So Coach Bryant really taught us about leadership. He always talked about the big picture. He talked about winning national championships every day. Are you going to be a part of a national championship? Are you going to be the best that you can be? Not only on the field, but how many people are you going to influence off the field? Let me tell you this, from this point on, you are different than the normal students. Do you understand this? You walk differently, you talk differently, and you hold yourself up. And he really did a phenomenal job with us to understand our roles. So I finally got a chance to play at Alabama, and it was against Notre Dame. Believe it or not, a guy missed his tackle in 1976. Coach Bryant threw me in there, and I got to say thank you to Touchdown Jesus, because he was overseeing me at that time, and got into the game, intercepted a pass, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're playing Auburn the next week, and I start for the first time as a sophomore. And then 2 weeks later, we played in the Liberty Bowl, and I'm voted most valuable player of the Liberty Bowl. I was like, wow, all of a sudden my career zoomed. Got into my senior year, finally got to play for a national championship against Penn State. They were number 1 in the country on a 19-game win streak. We were number 2 in the country, and Joe Paterno said, hey, we're going to play them. And it was a great game. It was 14-7. We fumbled the ball in the fourth quarter with about 4 or 5 minutes left in the game. They drive down to the goal line, and they have 4 shots to score. And we stop them on first down, second down, third down, and all of a sudden it came down to fourth down. And what
And that was Matsui, right?
It was Matsui was the fullback, but
Yeah.
Mike Gooman was the running back, and he ended up playing for the Rams. And it was Chuck Fusina as the quarterback. So we get in the huddle, and all of a sudden it's 4th and an inch. I mean, it's this far from winning a national championship. I mean, if they score, they're probably, and the momentum the game had changed dramatically, that they had dominated all the way down. And we're like, oh my God, it's out of control. We have to stop them. So I just remember that they called timeout, and Chuck Fusina goes to the sideline. We're in the huddle. And I remember talking to the players. I said, you know what? This is what Coach Bryant talked about. He said, there's going to be a time and a place where your back is up against the wall. It's going to be in the 4th quarter. It's going to be 4th down. And the question is, are you going to have the guts? Are you going to dig deep inside yourself and have the guts to rise to the occasion and make it happen? And that was the epitome, that play on the goal line, if you've seen it, is the epitome of what Alabama football stood for. I mean, it was incredible how we stopped them on the goal line. I mean, we rose to the occasion and won a national championship, Coach Bryant's 5th national championship. He goes on the next year and goes undefeated, wins his 6th national championship. And I swear, because of that play, I was the most valuable player of the Sugar Bowl, and it propelled me into the NFL, and I got drafted by the Baltimore Colts by Ted Marchibroda. And it was just a big part of my life, a serious, transition, and something that really catapulted me into the NFL and got
first rounder in the NFL. And I mean, and you didn't think you were going to be able to play at Alabama when you first got there, and yet you were a first rounder in the NFL and had a marvelous and a long career there, and really, because of your work ethic, because of those things that you learned at a young age, you were able to overcome a lot of injuries throughout your career.
Yeah. One of them was a pinched nerve. And Zoop, you know a little bit about this. You really helped me build up my neck, but it would paralyze me. Whenever I'd hit somebody, just almost like every other game, I would either paralyze myself or my arm would go completely numb and I'd have excruciating pain. And I remember when I was at Alabama, there was the first hit was down in 1975. I was a freshman, and this fullback ran me over, pinched my nerve, and that guy, Coach Goostree, comes up to me and goes, "What is he?" He was bow-legged. He come over and go, "What's wrong, Krauss?" And I said, "I don't know. I can't feel my arm." And he goes, "Hang on a second." He goes over and he gets a piece of ice, and he goes, "Let me rub that on your neck." And I'm like, "That's it? That's all you?" It's like,
that's all you got for me?
He believed that ice was a miracle. It was a miracle, and that's what he'd do all the time. He'd put ice on it, but
that's about as bad as rub some dirt on it.
Yeah, pinched nerve all the way through my career into playing for the Colts, and you helped me build it up. I had a neck brace, but I'd still paralyze myself. I was doing it when I played for the Dolphins, and fortunately for me, I've been blessed. I don't have any issues yet with my neck, but that was a tough thing to overcome. Is just the injuries. If you want to get into my transition, where you were a big part of my life, can I share with you? Share with everyone?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. In 1986, I blow out my knee. The first time I ever had an injury, serious injury like that. So I go in. And they scoped my knee. It was against the Jets, and they scoped the knee, and I had torn cartilage. So they scoped it, really kind of an easy operation. Back then, it was everybody's learning how to do it. And I remember Dr. Shelburne coming in. He said, "Well, I got good news and bad news for you." And I said, "Well, okay." He goes, "What do you want first?" And I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He goes, "The good news is we trimmed up your cartilage, but the bad news is that you severed your ACL ligament." I go, "ACL ligament, what's that?" And he goes, "Well, let's just put it to you this way. If you want to play in the NFL, you need another one." I go, "Okay, so what's that look like?" He goes, "Well, next week, I need you to come in and we're going to reconstruct your knee." So I remember going to the San Francisco 49er game on Sunday, and on Monday, I had a operation on my knee where they basically reconstructed my knee with a new ACL ligament. Okay, I was in the hospital for a week, about 3 or 4 days with at that time for the scope. And I was in a week because of the rehab with this now reconstruction. And so I remember going to a game of the Colts, and my knee was swollen. So I remember going, hey, I got to go see the doctor. I go to him, and he says, oh, my gosh. He goes, oh, that does not look good. So he aspirated my knee, and he pulled off like 90 cc's of fluid. And he goes, you're going back in the hospital. I go, why? He goes, you got an infected knee. I had staph.
Worst thing that could have happened.
Staph, worst thing. So I went in the hospital. They flushed my knee out, my third operation in 4 weeks now. And there's a lot of things that I realized. I remember coming out of the hospital, and if you've ever had that experience of being in for about 4 or 5 days, it's really an incredible experience when you come outside, because all of a sudden you hear all these noises, you feel the wind, you feel all these things that you weren't stimulated before. And you're just like, I looked around, I said, you know what, I could have died, and, here's life just going on by, and I thought to myself, I've got a chance to make a difference here. And a lot of people wrote me off saying, hey, Barry, with these 3 surgeries, Barry Krauss is done. His career's over. And I remember, Zoop, you came to me into my hospital room and you said, Barry, do you want to play football again? And I said, yeah. I was kind of, yeah. And he goes, well, if you're interested, you come and find me when you get back, and you come and talk to me. And I said, okay. So that's what I did. I came back, and then I started my rehab. And Zoop, we lift. Zoop goes, I want to see you at 4 o'clock at my dad's gym in Beech Grove, Indiana. I'm like, where's that? So we drove down there, and here's this little gymnasium with all of these, cables and wheels and stuff. And Zoop explains to me that Gus, his dad, had made all these things. And so we started working out together at 4 a.m. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, I was working out with Ron Solt and a couple other guys. And I went from losing 30 pounds in the hospital because I was so sick to gaining weight. My playing weight in the NFL was usually around 245. I was 268. I was bigger and stronger. Zoop had got me on a weightlifting program, a squats, a bench press. I could, and we'd work out in the morning, and in the afternoon, I always worked on my sprinting. And about you as you're sitting here, but Zoop, you not only helped me physically come back, where I was, I'm 6'3", I was about 245, and I was 6'3", 268. But I came back, I was running a 4.58 40. I was bigger, stronger, and meaner. Zoop had gotten into my head, and he said, man, you want to be a leader? You want to get back out on the football field? This is what you got to do. And when you walk out on the football field, you got to dominate. You got to control everybody. You got to make, and it was like this whole paradigm shift for me. And Zoop, you just inspired me in a lot of different ways. And I ended up playing 5 more years in the NFL. One last story. When I came back to play, my knee didn't pass this test called a Cybex test.
Yeah, I remember.
It had a ratio between the hamstring and the quad. And I walked out on the field, and I was discouraged because I'd had all the surgeries, all the great off season with you, Zoop. And I was walking around, you went, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, the doctors just flunked me. They're not going to let me back out of the field. And he goes, why? And I go, because I failed this test. And he goes, where's the test? And he goes, meet me back in there in 5 minutes. I said, all right. So I walked back in there. I got Dave Hammer, who's the trainer now. He strapped me into this thing, and Zoop walks in. He goes, you ready? And before I could say ready, he reaches out with this big paw of his with calluses all over it and slaps me across the face.
Oh
and he goes, are you ready? And before I could say anything else, he hits me again. And I'm like, yes. And all of a sudden, I do this Cybex machine. I almost broke the machine. And I easily passed the test, got back out on the field. But again, Zoop, I don't know if you remember half these things.
Oh, I remember that.
Slapped the tar out of me. And
I was just glad you didn't hit me back.
I couldn't get you. Sorry, dog. But it was phenomenal. It's been a really good thing, Zoop. You've helped me a lot.
But, we had some great times. And really, the National Football League, I mean, it was old back then, but there were a lot of new things coming into play. I mean, the weight room and the lifting and the off-season training programs, they were non-existent. I mean, we were one of the first ones to have that, and a lot of it was because Jim Irsay was a weightlifting enthusiast, and he enjoyed, doing that. Alex, there was nobody doing yoga. Okay, Alex, they came around and they started introducing strength and conditioning into football, into the arena, and obviously guys like Barry are a testament that work through injuries. You can climb on top of things and you stay with it a lot longer. He doesn't have any problems today. He's walking around, pretty much pain free. So
Yeah.
Don't just become like an incredible Hulk and can't move.
yeah. I mean that's what you had to avoid from happening. So everything had to be well rounded. You had to have a good running program, a good stretching program, and a good lifting program. And we did a lot of functional stuff like push that little orange car around. I mean,
Yes, we did, didn't
did
we?
a lot of those types of things as
Dude,
well.
tell them about the competition at the end of the off season with the trophies.
Oh, we'd have the Ironman competition. So every year, it's a lot of you do a lot of testing. When you do the combine, they test you on the bench press, they test you on the vertical jump, they do all these different things, and they decide what kind of athlete you are, what kind of athletic ability you have. But we had our own little rock throw where you threw like a 60-pound boulder
Yes.
as far as you could, and there were some of the other things we had. We had a bench press. You had to bench press 2.25 as many times as you could, and a lot of these guys would do many more than they would do when they were in the combine because they were all in fantastic shape at this point in time. But we had this Ironman competition, and then when that was all over with, and you wouldn't do this today, we had beer and steaks that we would cook outside and celebrate a good off season. So it was really the last of the old school thinking and the beginning of new school thinking. And and then that was my second year in the league when we're talking about all these things. And I was in the league for 28 years, so for 16 years I was a strength and conditioning coach. So man, things changed like crazy. Now they have 5 and 6 strength and conditioning coaches on each team. They wouldn't let me have an intern. They were afraid he would eat too much.
Yeah, but you changed it. I mean, you were one of the first ones in the NFL to ever do what you did, and you made it so much fun too. I mean,
Yeah, we
a lot of guys
did have a good time.
It was a seafood diet. And so that was one of the reasons why I gained all my weight. I was with Ron Solt, remember the offensive lineman?
Oh yeah.
And they, I'd eat a couple dozen eggs. I wanted to be worthy of these guys, so they'd order a dozen eggs. Yeah, I'll take a dozen eggs too, and all the raisin toast, a pound of bacon, be fine. And we used to just eat so much, but we worked out, we had fun, and Zoom, you made it fun. And at the end, with the trophies and all, and it came down to, remember the decision was your weight class. They had a weight cutoff, and then it came down to body fat. Remember?
Yeah.
And so that was how you won. Like if you were 240 pounds or less, body fat, how'd you do? And then above that, so. But it was.
We were introducing a lot of things at those times.
Sure.
It reminds me when you say you remember Don Joyce, don't you? The scout,
Yes.
the Baltimore Colts scout.
Uh-huh.
Well, he was voted the meanest man in football, in pro football. Now he is a lot older than you and I. I don't think Mr. Joyce is still alive today. But one time we were going to we were going down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. And I went out to eat with this guy, and this guy was big. I mean, he was like 340 and a big man, and he had a reputation for being able to eat, as did I. I could put away. So
that's a good reputation.
And he ordered a 12-pack of beer. So he's eating 144 oysters. I'm barely able to choke down these 60s. I felt like the biggest wimp in town. I mean, this guy's, he's telling stories about he got shot and all kinds of other things.
No.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He had a plethora of good stories. So, but that was really back when the league had changed, and there were still some guys, the older guys that were in there that kind of went through those old times and those old days. And you really were on that, that cusp where players changed.
Yeah. And just to really kind of, again, it wouldn't have happened unless you had a relationship with Jimmy. And you and Jimmy, you go, I got Jimmy's credit card or something. I don't know what you did, but he went and bought big speakers and put them in the weight room.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he bought brand new weights and everything else. And it was all these squat racks and things that, we had never been around. But Jimmy just said, man, do it. Make it happen. And I remember Hunter Smith, they had the training room not far from us. Zoop and I, we turned that thing up. Blah, 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 He had little CDs. Remember, you bought a little CD, a whole system and everything. And we would rock this the facility. And I don't know, people would complain. They'd like, I remember Bob Turpin coming down and goes, yo, I can hear that on the other end of the place. I can't believe you're doing this. And Zoop would just kind of laugh, and man, we're working out, man. This is how it is. But Jimmy was phenomenal. He really did. I remember watching you bring him in, and he's doing, Jimmy Irsay, the owner of the Colts, is doing squats. And he's like, yeah. And
he squatted 700 pounds.
Did he really?
Yes.
That's more than me.
Yeah.
Zoop would have these shirts, and these shirts that were like 10 times too small for you. And it would take almost an hour to get you in them. And you'd be like this. And he got Jimmy Irsay in one. Jimmy's doing the squat. He's got squat thing. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to. But we had this thing called Plan B. So Ernie, of course, he was a good friend of mine, who was the general manager of the Baltimore Colts way back when. And then Bud Carson became head coach at Cleveland. Remember, Bud was,
oh yeah,
no, he was there before you, but Bud was the defensive coordinator for the Steelers when they won all the Super Bowls. He's, I mean, a phenomenal coach. He becomes head coach, brings me up there. I end up going through training camp and getting cut. I thought it was the worst day of my life. I really did. I said, God, what has happened? I had my 11th year. I'm in great shape. I get released. I thought it was the worst day. And I remember loading up my truck in Cleveland and going down, driving 5 hours back to Indianapolis, emptying my truck out at about 7, 8 a.m. in the morning the next day. And I get this phone call, and, it's like, really, who's calling me at 8 o'clock in the morning? And it's Don Shula. He says he's Don Shula. I'm like, yeah, sure. It's probably Zupanzik over there. Hey, this is Don Shula. I want you to play for the Dolphins. I'm like, no way. And I did. I went, no way. And he goes, hang on a second. I'll put somebody on And George Hill got on the phone, which George Hill. He was our defensive coordinator with the Colts, and he became the coordinator with the Dolphins. And he goes, hey, Dolphins want you, Coach Shula, And I said, great. And this was in September. Ended up starting and leading the team in tackles and playing for my childhood dream, because I grew up in Pompano and I loved the Dolphins, loved Don Shula. So what I thought was one of the worst things that could have happened. And I, from a spiritual standpoint, a lot of times you don't understand why things end, but they have to end sometimes for you to move forward in your life. And if it wasn't for me being cut by the Cleveland Browns, I would never have been able to play for the Miami Dolphins and finish on my career. But it was phenomenal to be able to do that. So here's my story. So I go in with the Dolphins, and we were at a junior college. That's where we worked out. It was just this beat up, dilapidated facility. And I remember walking in, and there's this 90 by 50, 90 by 80 place. And it had a fence all the way across this one side that overlooked a pool. It's kind of weird. And the weight, like the bench presses and the incline benches, everything had rust on them. I was like, what is this? Doesn't anybody lift? And I see this guy over in the corner, and he's smoking a cigarette. I mean, we're right by the training room. I walk in, this part of the facility, he's smoking. And he's a tight end for the Dolphins. And I go, hey, is this the weight room? And he goes, takes his fork, and he goes, I think that's what they call this. I mean, Shula didn't believe in working out either. So I revamped that. I took a Zupanzik Jr. attack, and I got the coaches to believe that we could get better weights and stuff. And I remember the reason being is I was doing an incline, and the incline bench was wood, and it was rotted out, and it snapped on me. That's how bad the weight room with the Dolphins. You would never believed it. Now, multi-million-dollar facilities, but Zoop was so far ahead. And I took that to the Dolphins, and I got Dolphin players working out. And I think, it just has, he's influenced me and been able to finish my career on a high note.
Well, and you had equal influence on me. Believe me, Alex. There's some things, you're very young, and you're going to learn some things here. We had a thing we called self-imposed environmental misery. Okay, and that meant when it was 100 degrees outside and you were on your 10th two-a-day.
Yeah.
Okay. I would wear 2 pairs of sweats.
Yeah.
Krauss would come out. He would have sweats on under his uniform.
Yes.
And you would drive yourself and do things. And I'd always have hurt players that I'd work with during practice where I'd be pushing with them and wrestling with them and doing all kinds of different things. And you'd see, we would lose 10, 12, 14 pounds in practice.
Crazy.
It was before anybody knew that you were supposed to drink water. It was a weakness.
That little that makes up like 70% of us.
Yeah. Well, you had plenty of it. You had 70%.
Yeah.
Why did you need more? But it was one of those deals where really water was a weakness. That's the way people thought.
And I would be concussed because I was on all special teams, and I remember getting dinged, and I didn't know that getting dinged was the same as a concussion, because it was one of those things where you'll make a hit and something just happened and you're not totally there, but you can still function. And so I went through most of my career with like dings, and people ask me all the time, how many concussions you have? And it's not a joke, but I go, I don't remember how many I had, but I was telling Zoop, I used to hit with my face, and you could tell that. But I remember going into the training weight room, into the room where Johnny Scout was.
Yeah.
And during halftime, and I said, Johnny, why is my helmet rolling across my head? That's because you flattened it out, Barry, because you flattened the face mask. Face masks are like rounded. I would come in and it would be flat because I'd hit you with it. It was just all about headbutting and everything. And that's what it was back then. And, it was just, that's what made it happen. But one of the stories about Zoop was always a trendsetter and always trying to motivate us on the sideline. He'd walk around with ammonia inhalants and make us snort it, and he'd headbutt us with our helmets on. He'd headbutt us. He didn't have a helmet, and he'd headbutt us. I'm like, he goes, "Are you guys ready? Yeah, you ready?" And stuff. So he comes out. We're playing the New England Patriots in New England.
Oh, I remember that one.
I believe it's this one. Yeah, it was that game. It was like 30 below. Zoop comes out, and he's wearing a T-shirt. I think you had shorts on or something. And you were trying to motivate us, and we were like looking at Zoop, what are you doing? You don't have any clothes on. He goes, it's all right, it doesn't bother me. He was trying to make sure the weather didn't bother us. And so afterwards he runs in. I go, Zoop, man, how'd you do that? He goes, man, I told you. He goes, I couldn't have taken another minute. I was crying. I had to get inside. I was freezing. Dumbest thing I'd ever done.
Oh, it was a halftime. I went in at halftime, and George Hill, who was our coordinator at the time, called a timeout, and I almost killed him. If I could have moved, I would have killed him. But I went in at halftime, and John Scott, the equipment guy, still the equipment guy now, he gave me so much clothes, so many outfits. I put on I looked like the Michelin Man in the second half when I came back out. But the sun in New England goes like this, boop, boop, like that. It stays up for about 15 seconds, so we didn't get a lot of warmth. But again, self-imposed environmental misery. We did things
on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, we did things to make ourselves miserable just to see if we could do it.
Yeah.
And, there has to be a lesson there somewhere. I haven't figured out what it is yet. There has to be a good reason why we did that.
Oh, yeah.
Harry, I've got a question for you. Speaking of self-imposed misery, John and I went and worked out with Papa Zoop over a holiday one time, and he showed us this exercise that he said he would do with some of the players that were injured to help rehab them. And you know that you had just said that he helped you come back from that knee surgery. Did he ever do the thing with the broom handle with the towels on the end, or like work you out with like just a plain towel?
Just the manual exercises.
Yeah, the manual exercises. Because I was about ready to take that broom and throw it out the window.
Was it Jack LaLanne type of isometrics?
No, actually, it was just where I put, you would do sideways things, you do curls, and I would just put resistance against it, and you did it the way I used to work your neck, and you would do, multiple sets of that and, pushing on it. But, the newbies came in and they wanted to do that workout. I was
like, what is this like strange contraption and why does it hurt so bad?
Why does it hurt so bad?
There was always a benefit at the end of the day. Somehow we got a benefit.
If you looked up Zoop in the dictionary, pain would be right next to it.
I was very upfront in saying that that's how it would go, and she didn't believe me.
Yeah. Well, John grew up kind of in that fashion. Our fun, a lot of kids played tag and stuff like that in the neighborhood. He would, him and Jake and even Katie, they would run up and down the big hill that we have out in front here, and they'd have to carry a chair up to the top of the hill, then some dumbbells to the bottom of the hill. Then they'd have to run back up, make 3 free throws because I had to throw some skill set in there. So they had to make 3 free throws, and then whoever won got like a piece of candy or something. So it was
I was
playing those games.
I was
playing their own screwed up version of the Von Trapp family.
I was wondering what it would be like to live with Zoop every day as a dad. Did he slap you or anything every once in a while? Like, hey, come on, it's time to eat.
Yeah, just a little bit. Always playful, happy motivation is what it was.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah.
Alex, shoot Barry another question here. I saw you start to ask.
Yeah, for sure. So I was doing a little research on you because, I'm not as well versed in, a lot of the football terminology and everything. But what I did find was that you're an artist, and I would love to hear more about some of the work that you do, your inspiration, and how you kind of started, painting to begin with.
Yeah, I started drawing when I was a kid. I mean, that's what I did in school. I drew pictures, instead of learning anything else. So I've been always an artist.
It's fine.
Yeah. So, I've just always done it. My mother's an artist, and my dad was an artist, and we have artists in our family. And it's kind of ironic that here's a middle linebacker in the NFL trying to take people's heads off that likes to work in watercolor. And so I like watercolor. I like the different mediums. I don't do so much in acrylics, but I do pastels, and I'm just learning how to do oils. I'm enjoying oils now. And so during this period of time, I've really pushed myself to try to learn the medium. And it's kind of ironic because watercolor, basically you have to think ahead. There's no white watercolor. So you have to leave that area white on the paper. Okay. And so that's your thought as you start to plan a picture. Whereas in oils, the white's the last thing. And it's about layering. It's about patience. So I'm trying to learn patience with oils. And so, but I've had some great opportunities to do some really cool things. And one of the, ironically, a story, a lady came up in my neighborhood just about a month ago. I think it was about a month ago. And do you remember Bobby Bethard, that was the general manager of the San Diego Chargers?
Sure.
Well, there was a tragedy in Nashville, and Alex, you probably heard about it, but his grandson was murdered in Nashville at a club. He was a quarterback for a New York team, a little college team, and his name was Clay. And he and a bunch of his buddies went into a bar in Nashville in December of 2019, and some girl got accosted, and they said something about it. The guy goes outside, grabs a knife, and actually waits for them and kills him, stabs him in the chest, kills his friend, and stabs another guy. And it's Bobby Bethard, the great legendary Hall of Fame grandson. So this lady comes up to me and she goes, I don't know if you've heard about this, but I'm very close with the family, and I'd like to commission you because I heard you're an artist. Would you do me a favor and paint a picture of this young man? And I'm like, what do you want? What do you, and she said, I don't know. Just, would you do this and I'll pay you for it? I went, really? So I had not been painting for a while, and really, I didn't really know how to take it on. I was afraid to take it on because I hadn't been, and that was a huge burden upon me because she was going to give it to the family, you know, after they just buried their son. And it just was like heavy on my heart. So I probably went through 10 plus different renditions of him playing football, this position, this color. It would never come out. And it wasn't working. It was like, I can't do this. I was so close to calling this lady up and saying, I can't do this. This is just too much on my heart. I'm not good enough. And all of a sudden, I got up there and I had been asking the Lord to help me. And all of a sudden, I made this great picture of him. And it was a watercolor. And I went, wow, I did it. You know, I was able to get him in. He's a quarterback. And it just made me so happy that I finally got a finished product. My wife said, my God, this is fantastic. So I remember showing it to her and she said, oh my gosh, it's better than I ever thought. Thank you so much. Gave it to the mother of the son that passed away. She calls me up and she says, I just want to let you know how wonderful that is, you know, what you were able to do. It really, I know he's happy and he's thankful for what you've done. And for you to do that for our family at this time of tragedy, I really appreciate it. And thank you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to be doing more art. You know, if I can have an influence, I can help whatever little way. It inspired me. So I've been really through this whole virus thing, really trying to paint every day and learning how to paint with oil colors. So I was inspired. So I love art. I really am really into it.
I love that.
That's great. Let me ask you something. You say oils, because I dabble some with acrylics.
No, those are finger paints.
Yeah, they're like finger paints, but they dry so much faster. The oil, I go back to do something else, and it's not dry for days. It might be, you know, before it's dry. So I don't have the patience to stick with that. So I have to do something that I could put multiple layers on in one night. So have you found that oils are a lot more? And I never thought we'd be discussing this.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought that, or do you like painting with the oils? Do you enjoy the patience that it requires to be successful with it?
Zoop, I don't have very much patience like you're talking about. And this is really forcing me to do that. I've really gotten into art where I'm understanding that it's all about layers. And when I did watercolors, once I laid the stain down, it's there. I mean, I can't change it. I really can't blend it much and once it dries, I can't do anything. So acrylics, you can do a little bit more, but like you said, they dry really fast. And all of a sudden, before you know it, there it is. Yep. Oils have been, I mean, you got Picasso, Rembrandt, and all these Renaissance guys that learned how to work with a pigment in a medium. And the pigment is the color, and the medium might be linseed oils. And you mix these oils with, and these guys were doing this way back in the 1500s of these awesome, I mean, Leonardo da Vinci. You know, all the things that he was doing. But what I've realized is that you really do have to have patience. The great thing about oil is that you can come back and you can wipe it out. I did a portrait, which is one of the harder things to do. I did this portrait of this woman, and I didn't like the eyes, and I could take my brush and paint over the eyes and start all over again. I was like, really? I can do that. So you can fix things, you can adjust things, you can go away from your picture and come back to it and go, you know what? It's about tones, it's about shades. And so I'm learning all of that, where the darkness. And so here's an interesting thing about oils. I know we're getting into this, but you lay a background first. And that background might be a red and an orange background. And you're going, wait a minute, I'm doing a bunch of trees in the woods. Why would I have that? But you realize those colors, you cover them up, but you leave a little bit. And it gives you that, a lot of times, the depth that you're looking for, because
effect, yeah.
you're looking at something and it's 3D, and you're working on a one-dimensional plane. You're trying to reproduce that 3 dimensions, so you're trying to create that depth. And so you lay those colors down, the dark colors, and then they become the shade. And then you lighten it as you come closer and closer. It's really cool. And the spectrum of colors and understanding those things. So that's what I'm into. I'm learning all that.
Well, I've got your phone number. I want you to take a picture of several of your pictures. I'll take a picture of several of mine, and we'll shoot them back and forth to each other.
I'm glad that you're an artist. Maybe that's what brought us together.
So here's what's really interesting is, so Barry, 2 weeks ago, we interviewed Tony Mandrich, who is a photographer. So now I've met probably 3 of the biggest guys I've ever met in my whole life, and you're all artists of some sort. Papa Zoop, he paints with acrylics and he plays piano and does other music, and then you're this
photographer.
Yeah.
And you're an artist. What is it about that somebody that plays such a violent game, all of a sudden you're turning to art at the later in life? Is that it, Alex?
Well, yeah. So I just think it's really interesting because I was reading a article that you were interviewed in, Barry, and it talked about how, you play this violent game and you want to rip someone's arm off and then throw it back at them, but you use watercolor because it's soft, and then you've got Papa Zoop, who again is like one of the biggest guys I've ever met, and he's sending us photos, and we've got 2 beautiful pieces of art in our house now that are so like well thought out and like very intentional and beautiful. And it's just really interesting to see, these 2 amazing sides. Like, here's Papa Zoop, who slapped you in the face and made you do this interesting test. And now he's over here painting really bright, beautiful stuff. So
we're Renaissance men.
Yeah, that's right.
It warms my heart.
It is funny that we can laugh and joke. I mean, say, yeah, remember when you slapped me in the face as hard as you could?
Yeah.
And I
remember that. That was great.
Yes. And I liked it. It's like, before I'm surprised. And that's one of the things is, I was wondering why I've lost all my molars. It's because of people slapping me and me grinding them up. But I think I lost a couple teeth when you hit me that one time. But yeah, it's really interesting. What's cool is that photography is a big part of what that we do as artists. We'll look at pictures and stuff. And now I'm into a thing called plain art. Are you familiar with plain art?
No.
It's PLEIN, plain art. And plain art is where you go outside, set your easel up, and you paint landscape. You paint something, a building outside. You look at all the different variations of depth and colors and darkness and what brings certain things out and stuff. And it's really incredible how the more I know I don't know about art. And there's so much that we can continue to learn and transition. But a big part of art is balance. So when you look at a picture, like looking at it, they always tell you to squint, and you're looking for 4 to 5 different variations of a color. Like dark here, you got this dark color, this dark color, this color, and where is the light coming from? And so not only from an artist standpoint that we find ourselves, as far as what we do, but photographers, same thing of trying to find balance in the photograph. What are you trying to capture? What do you want the viewer to see, to experience? And that's what I guess Zoop and I are doing. We do it in a different capacity, but we're seeing it. And what's really cool is that it's our interpretation of what's there. It's not, there's some people that do almost like lifelike things. Well, I'm not a lifelike person, but I can get close and do some things. But it's how we look at things And I remember Barry White was interviewed one time, and they said, "Hey, man, there's some critics out there that don't like your music." And he goes, "You know what? I don't play my music for anybody else. It's all for me. It comes from my heart. And I'm not looking for approval from anybody else." And that's the same thing as artists. You know, when you paint something, you really put yourself out there, Zoop, for criticisms or critiques, however they come, and it could shatter your ego. I'm telling you, it's tough after the NFL. I mean, somebody looks at my thing and goes, "Oh," and my wife will go, "Oh my God, what is that?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't want you to even see it yet." So, you know, you put yourself out there as an artist.
But you know what? That's okay. It's good. I mean, I think it's one of the things that I take, you know, from the last couple of interviews that we've done, one with Tony Mandrich, who had a strange, very strange career. You know, he hit the highest highs and the lowest lows. And I know your career was like Rocky. I mean, you came from not thinking you could play at Alabama to being a national champion in college to being a first-round draft choice and playing for a dozen years in the NFL. You know, what did you take away from that mentally that you've transferred to your kids and transferred to other jobs that you've had? I know I hired you when I was at the Colts to do our post-game radio show. What did you take from those experiences into life?
I take a lot of things away from it. You know, really to become a self-starter and to really be a leader. So I did a lot of stuff in the communities. I contributed myself, you know, to doing a lot of things. But it's really helped me with my kids, you know, really just helping them. You know, a lot of times my wife would say, you know, "Barry, you know, the headbutting is not working with your daughter. Can you try something else?" I'm like, "Well, Zoop said it worked at one time." So, you know, I've always been a motivational speaker. I love to get up, and that was one thing that I got kind of thrown into is getting up in front of people. And I do a John Maxwell leadership program, and let me tell you this, if you want to lead a company, you want to be a leader, you got to be able to step up in front of people and talk to them. You got to feel good and comfortable, because whether you are a leader or not, you portray yourself as a leader as you stand before somebody. So I love to go and do corporate speaking engagements and go out there and relate what happened to me on the football field about, you know, taking control. First and foremost, you've got to understand that you got to get up with a purpose, and the purpose being whatever that is, and each day plan yourself out that, you know, you can be successful. And I look at all failures as successes, because same thing with the painting. Every time I ruin something, like I've ruined a lot of pictures, it's really emotional, and I like get upset and I throw the thing away and like, gosh, I'm terrible. And I'm like, no, I got to get back and do it again. And football taught me that it's about getting back up there, putting yourself out there for failure, putting yourself out there. But I truly have taken so much away from it. But I really miss being out on the football field. When I share with people, I said, you know, the Indianapolis Colts is $1 billion organization. And I was in charge of the defense, and I had to make sure all the defensive players were doing the right thing. I had to make the right calls. And I remember the responsibility of that, and understanding that the night before the game, I would sit in a shower in the hotel room, because we would check into a hotel before a game, NFL game, man. And I'd spend like almost 2 to 3 hours in the shower. And it was like kind of weird, but I'd sit there and I'd do every formation that the New England Patriots could come out, the personnel, what defenses I would call, how to check in and out of this or whatever. And then the next morning I would redo it again. I played the game over. By the time I got to the game, I knew what was about to happen. I could predict what happened. And that's what made Peyton Manning, one of the many things that I admired about him, but his work ethic was phenomenal, which I learned a lot. But I thought I had a pretty good one, but until I met him. But Peyton Manning would want you to blitz him. He'd want you, come on and blitz. You know, he'd go bring it on, because I'm going to burn your ass. because I know exactly what you're going to do. And it was preparation, meeting that opportunity. And so, you know, I love being out there in command of the defense. I love the responsibility. And there were times where I blew coverages. You know, I'd come to the sideline, George Hill, the defense coordinator, goes, why didn't you check out of that? It just cost us a touchdown. I said, I'm sorry, coach, I blew it, but I won't let it happen again. And so making adjustments on the field, it was just a really cool thing to be able to experience in front of 60,000 people, millions of people across the country. I miss the excitement of that, the thrill of that. And it's been hard after playing in the NFL to kind of even get close to that experience. And so, you know, I've gone through a lot of ups and downs. And because of what I learned about staying strong, getting back up, and believing in myself, and really a lot of the stuff is, you know, the mentally, I can do it, not, you know, I can't do it. I can do it. I will do it. I'll get it done. And so all the different things and projects that I've gotten into, I've done a lot of different business opportunities, projects, and been very successful at them. And it was because of that work ethic that I learned on the football field and in that weight room with you, Zoop.
Well, and I you know, I couldn't be prouder to be a part of your life and saw you grow from you know, a football player to you became a man when you were in the NFL, and then you know, afterwards you dealt with the change that took you out of the limelight. You came back, you did sideline work, you kept in touch with the game, like the game that you loved all your life, and you still are in touch with it. So I think that's a fantastic storyline to keep going. Now you throw the art thing in there, you really got some interesting concepts.
And I got to thank Jimmy Irsay and Pete Ward. I mean, and you. I mean, you gave me the opportunity, and Pete Ward has just been kind. Jimmy Irsay. And I'm one of those old guys. I mean, it's so funny because I'll go around these young players. I'm just looking at them and I go, God, they're just babies. They're little babies, you know. And they really, a lot of them don't know history in the NFL. You know, you could ask them who Johnny Unitas was, and they're like, I don't know who Johnny Unitas. How about Joe Namath? Who's that?
Yeah.
They really don't know the history. And so it has been so incredible, like you said, to still be in touch with the game, to be close to it. And I just remember doing the sideline reporting for the nothing last year, okay? And I remember watching these 300-pound linemen come over the sideline and right in front of me hit the running back. Boom! Just smack him. And I was like, whoa! I mean, that had to hurt. And both of them would bounce back up and run back to the huddle. Yeah. And I'm like, I used to do that. But nowadays, when I go down on the ground, it takes me a while to get back up. Oh, yeah. I crack up, and some people go, Barry, man, you look like you could still play. I'm like, let me tell you this. True story. I'd be good for one kickoff, and I would be a lot of nuts and bolts and an oil slick right behind me, but I'd give it all kinds of hell. But, you know, the game is so incredible, Zoop. You have this short window, and before I know it, 30 years ago, I played in the NFL. It's like, what? And you have that opportunity, whatever that is, to experience in that. And before you know it, it's over, and you reflect on it. And, you know, when you look back, you just don't want to have any regrets. And I kind of look at life that way too. You're talking about, what did you take away? I remember there was a wrestler in the Olympics, and Zoop, you probably know him and what he did, but he was the heavyweight champion of the world for the United States of America.
Rulon Gardner. Yeah.
Yes. And do you remember what he did in the final?
Let the shoes.
Yeah. So let me play that up. He wins a gold medal, and then 4 years later, he goes through all these injuries. I guess it was just brutal on him, and it just took a toll on him. And so afterwards, I think he ended up getting a bronze medal. And afterwards, he just sits down after his last match, unlaces his shoes, and everybody's watching him. And they were like, what's he doing? And he goes and he leaves his shoes out in the middle of the mat. And the reporters are going, what was that all about? he said, that represents the fact that I gave it everything that I had and I left it out there. I thought that was just an awesome, and that's how I feel. I wanted to really kind of leave it out on the field and just give it everything. And like I said, I don't have any regrets. I did the best I could. I tried the best. And with your help, Zoop, I got back in there and played another 5 years. And, I went and fulfilled a childhood dream playing for, Don Shula. So I've just had a wonderful life. And I just thank all the wonderful people in my life. And you're a big part of it.
You look great. You say these guys don't know the history of the history of everything. I don't think anybody truly appreciates the history until they become part of it. And, you become part of it when you look back on all these friendships, you look back on all these relationships and things that you developed over the years, and you touch base with those people and see how they're doing today. And some of them are doing well, some of them aren't doing well. But, it's great to see you and hear you on the radio, see you on television, and Alex thinks you look like who did you think you looked like?
Oh my gosh, you were the spitting image of Tom Selleck and Burt Reynolds.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah, Tom Selleck and Burt Reynolds. Get out of here.
Sent me a couple photos and I was like, that's not.
Yeah. It's not funny, Zoop. She's not being funny.
If his head gets any bigger, he's gonna weeble over on us and fall down.
I can't help literally. As soon as I saw that photo, I was like, I know that face. I know it. I've seen it, and I was like,
on a dartboard.
No.
Well, Barry, we want to thank you for coming on. And
we got a couple more questions.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Questions from the audience, but I also have one more question for both of you. So obviously both of you are very motivational. Barry, you're a motivational speaker. Papa Zoop, you are too. And you're also both artists, like we talked about earlier. But I know that like right now, while we're all still in self-isolation and in quarantine, you've got a lot of people with a little bit more time on their hands, really trying to figure out how to be productive in the world, like how to make something that, I don't know, might make an impact, might not, might just pass the time, who knows, but kind of just like get by. And so I'd love to hear from both of you what advice you have for people trying to create in this space of unknowing and just weirdness that we're all going through right now.
Go ahead, Barry. What do you got?
I just think that with all this going on, I just think that from a spiritual standpoint that, I trust in the Lord, and I trust that we're going to come out of this stronger as a country. I think we have great leadership right now with President Trump. I think he's done a phenomenal job. I mean, it's been very difficult for everyone. It's a once in a lifetime experience. I've never experienced anything like that. But it's really bringing communities and families together. There's always something good when something happens. I think people say sometimes you have to have the dark to see the light. And I think that's what we're going through. So I'm always motivational and positive, where I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot of good things that we can take away from this experience. First off, you're seeing a lot of families come together and doing things a lot more with each other. The moms and dads, they're doing things. I see kids out on the streets riding bicycles again. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen kids riding bicycles. I got people, husband and wives, my wife and I, we take walks, and we see other people taking walks throughout the neighborhood. I mean, when's the last time you saw really couples walking together? And so there's so many incredibly wonderful things that are happening. Our world will never be the same, and it'll be, I think, better for it. I think that we're learning more about where we are with our lives, and all dealing with the reality of death. I mean, think about that. I mean, we got people dying from this virus. They basically get on respirators and they're gone. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're kind of checking into, am I doing the right things in my life? And it's a self-check, I think, too, for all of us, and learning to live with each other. My wife and I it's ironic, but we get along really well. We really do. We have some moments, but both of us are on the same page most of the time. We encourage each other with some challenges. She has a business that's been really shut down. I mean, it really has. Mine, not so much. Hopefully the NFL will come back and So I've got that going. As far as real estate, everything's really slowed down with that, with what we do. So there's financial challenges, there's spiritual challenges, but I just think this is we're going to come out of this bigger, badder, and stronger as a country and more united. And I pray for our leadership. I really do. And I'm just proud to be an American, and I know we're going to find a way out of this as a country and as a world, and we're going to be better for it.
Barry, I don't think a lot could be said better than what you said right there. I know my wife and I have been married, Carrie, we've been married over 40 years.
Wow.
And rediscovering each other. When I go to work every day, I've spent, a lot of time at work. And, she spends a lot of time was an at-home mom and has her schedule that she goes through. Well, now that I'm working from home, we had to learn how to coexist again. So, and
Who are you?
Yeah.
Why are you home?
Right. Yeah. Why are you constantly in my way? That's what she's thinking about me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But, you learn how to coexist again and really you kind of fall in love all over again. I mean, it's that type of a feeling. And, I like you think, I'm a glass half full guy. I think we're going to come through this. I think we're going to be better on the other side of it. And, it's a lesson learned, albeit very expensive lesson learned, not only with the health and the death that comes with this, but the financial ramifications on a lot of people in their businesses. And, people are going to have to bounce back. And we're in the best country in the world to bounce back. So, God willing, we will.
And I totally agree with you. And one of the things that I do miss about the NFL is the relationships. It's our relationship, you and me, Zoop, over the years. We could still come together. And I think, like you said, you're rediscovering your relationship with Carrie after 4 years. And relationships are the most important thing, I believe, in life. I mean, it really is. And I cherish those relationships. I've only got a couple of friends. At one time, I didn't know if I had any friends, but it was kind of but a joke. But it's about those relationships. I have some good friends from college, only a couple that we stay in touch, and a couple from the NFL. I've got one, Zoop, you're from the NFL, Jimmy Irsay, these relationships, and they're so valuable now. I think that's what maybe there's a heightened awareness on relationships. Dealing with each other and working with each other, relationship with your wife, with your kids, your community, neighbors, and everything else. So you're right. I think we're going to come out of this well.
I hear you say that. And one thing that I was kind of thinking about when all this started was, there's so many people I've talked to in the last month or two that I haven't talked to in maybe months or years. And I think it's only because someone told me I couldn't go see them anymore. And then all of a sudden there's like this revitalized spirit to be like, I must connect with people. Like I must find some normalcy. I must do this. And now it has created this space to cultivate or like revitalize old relationships. John and I, we've only been married for about 1.5 years now, but it's surprisingly been great so far in quarantine. I do yoga with a friend of mine that I haven't talked to in like several months every week, and it brings me back to life. And so it's funny what you can do when someone tells you can't do it anymore.
Well, and I got to jump in here real quick, Barry, and you'll appreciate this. She said revitalize old relationships. I have socks older than her relationship. Okay.
And trust me, he does.
Yeah, her old relationships, but the spirit is there. I understand where you're coming from, Alex. It's if I were a young person plugged into social media and all those types of things, I mean, this is an opportunity now to really see what those things are all about, and those things are keeping a lot of people sane right now. Being able to communicate. So it's a sign of the times. Barry, you and I probably not on Facebook every day,
No.
But this is Facebook for me right here. Where we're
Barry, I
talking.
gotta tell you, I was sharing some stuff on social media, and I was like trying to find you on Instagram and like trying to find you on Twitter and like all this stuff to tag you in. And I was like, I think that's him. I don't know. He's only got like 11 people. He hasn't posted since 2016. Like, I don't know if this is him or not.
Well, my roommate at Alabama was Forrest Gump, and neither one of us were very smart men. And I'm not
good.
big into the whole Facebook thing, but I fake it.
That's
All right,
good.
we got a couple questions real quick from the audience. The first one being, when did you find out that the Colts were moving from Baltimore to Indy, and what was that transition, and what did it look like from a player position?
Wow, that's a great question. It was kind of crazy. For about 2 or 3 years, the owner of the Colts, Bob Irsay, had been threatening to move the team. And at that time, what I knew is that he had to show losses, that he was losing money to the rest of the other owners before he could even move a franchise. And he was trying to negotiate a deal on our stadium. It was called Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, and it was really dilapidated. It was just toilets didn't work, ceiling panels are falling off. It was just a rough place to play, and it was the same place as where the Orioles played. So we would play on grass and part of that clay way back then. So you'd make a tackle, and you'd get up, and there'd be clay in your face and everything else. But what happened was, it was Edward Bennett Williams owned the Orioles and Bob Irsay for the Colts. And both of them went to the city and wanted the city to pay for a new stadium. And the city said no. So he just said, you know what, I'm going to move the team. And he threatened to do it. And so we're watching all this going on. And it was the fans of Baltimore didn't like it a bit. They just didn't like the way he was going about it. And when I found out, there was like 4 or 5 different places. Jacksonville, Florida was a potential for the Colts. Shea Stadium in New York, where we used to play the New York Jets, Zoop. And I don't know if you ever played there, we ever played there, but it was a baseball field. Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona was another one. And a place called Indianapolis. So we had heard about these teams. And I just remember the night that it went down. I was in apartment with a guy, Pat Beach, and he was a tight end for the Colts. And Pat calls me up. He goes, Barry, man, it's going down. I'm like, what? He goes, the Colts are leaving. And I lived in Owings Mills, Maryland, and that's exactly where our facility was. And we saw the trucks go in. The semis went in, the Mayflowers went in, and hours later, all of a sudden they came out, and you saw that famous picture, and it was almost like surreal. Man, we're going, And so that night, everybody took off, and I, read some story. I actually talked to one of the Mayflower drivers that basically said that they had split up all the semis so that they wouldn't get stopped. And at that time, there was a law that needed to be passed in Maryland that was not passed because they didn't believe the Colts were going to do it, but it's called eminent domain. And so the reason why they did it in the middle of the night, because the legislature couldn't meet until 8 o'clock that next morning. By the time the legislator, they met with an emergency session, they passed the law, the semis were already out of the state. So physically it was gone. And it was really weird because I went over to the complex afterwards, and I was like, wow. And it looked like a tornado. I mean, these guys came in and ripped everything out of there, anything with the Colts stuff. There was junk on the floor. And what was the sad part was that there were a couple said, what's going on? What can we do? And he goes, well, Barry, if you want to play for the Colts, you got to come to Indianapolis. I went, all right, I'm there. So Chris Hinton said, yeah, I came over on the Mayflower to Indianapolis. And then I think it was the next day we had a pep rally in the RCA Dome. That was, no, not the RCA Dome, the Hoosier Dome.
Hoosier Dome.
I think it was Hoosier Dome. There were like 30,000 people there. Yeah. And Baltimore got tired of us. So we were like, you play for the Colts, we don't want to talk to you. I think this. Come to Indianapolis, these fans just went like, we love you, man. All right, the Colts. I was like, wow, maybe I just made the NFL, man. This is fun. People actually like us and want us. And so the transition. So I remember Bob Irsay getting up and talking with Bill Hudnut, and then the lawyer, which I'm fan base. I would come out after a game, after about an hour of icing down, and the parking lot was empty. I mean, really, except for a van over by where now there's a baseball stadium, and it was called the Green Van Fan Club, and they'd wait for me, and I'd have a beer. I didn't eat game day, so I would eat, and they'd feed me, and it was wonderful. But it's great to see the transition of the team, how, you know, it came from Indianapolis, didn't have a fan base, and it built it. And we did not win. I mean, it was one of the tough things. You know, I had 6 different head coaches in the first 7 years with the Colts. Think about that. I mean, I had quarterbacks, Burt Jones, Mike Pagel, Art Schleister, Mark Herman, you know, had a lot of different, Jack Trudeau, a lot of different quarterbacks.
Gary Hogaboom.
Yeah, Gary Hogaboom. And we really never had, and nothing against those guys, but, you know, a franchise quarterback or a franchise running back until 1987 when Ron Meyer went out and got, you know, Eric Dickerson. And within that first year that Eric was there, guess what? We win the AFC, which was cool, the AFC East or whatever, and winning that game, winning the AFC East. And all of a sudden it was like, cool. We finally had Monday Night Football in 1987. I'd never had that. So I'm proud of being a part of that base or the foundation of the Colts and where they are and where they've been able to go with, you know, with Peyton Manning is phenomenal, winning the Super Bowl. I'm so proud of them. And, you know, people say, oh, Barry, yeah, I remember those old days. They weren't very good days, or I remember those rough years. And I'm like, yeah, I was in the rough years. We're trying to find our way through this thing. But I'm so proud to still be part of this organization and to see it prospering. And Jimmy Irsay has been the gift. I just wish I could have played for him as an owner. But he's just a phenomenal guy, and he's just so generous. And he's been able to help this team go from mediocre to, you know, really being on the map and being a contender and a
expecting
champion.
Greatness every year.
Yes,
you know?
Expecting greatness.
So that's great. There's no question.
I got another audience question for you.
Okay.
Shula and Bryant were legendary coaches, obviously. Were there any similarities in their coaching styles?
Oh, a lot of similarities. Again, you know, Coach Shula would talk about winning a Super Bowl. What are we going to do to win a Super Bowl? You know, he'd always talk about that in practice. We're not playing well. We're not champions. We're not walking right. We're not doing the right things. We got to be examples. We got to get out there. And they both were great leaders and great motivators. And when you say a motivator, you got to understand, and I see this in the Nick Saban as well, they have a unique way of relating to the players. And what happens is, the players, like I playing for Coach Bryant or Don Shula, the worst thing I could ever do was disappoint him. Oh my gosh, you know, I would never want to, you know, disappoint Coach Bryant. I mean, he gave me the opportunity to have a scholarship and to play for Alabama. That was the worst thing that would hurt me, because there were times when I hurt Coach Bryant because I didn't try hard enough sometimes. I got discouraged. I had to fight through some tough times in the first couple of years at Alabama. And then thing with John Shula, I was like, oh my God, you're my idol. I don't want to disappoint you. And those great leaders do that. And they were able to get a group of people together and help them share a common goal and come together, black, white, whatever, you know, fast, small, big, whatever, and be able to accomplish this goal. And it's to be part of something greater than yourself. And that's what those great coaches did for us, Coach Bryant and Coach Shula. They allowed us to be a part of something. So it was very special. It meant more than just going out and putting a day of work in. You're going, okay, I'm just going through the motions. I really don't care. No, I want to be a part of something special. So, you know, when I came into the NFL, The NFL players didn't help me. They just them. So I'm going to help them become the best that they can be. I can help them mentally. Hey, remember, you got to drop back here. You got to do like this. So I help do that. So that's what I saw, and that's what I learned from Coach Bryant and Don Shula, was the fact that they were winners, they were champions, and I wanted to be a part of that. And it was a great experience to have known both of them. And, it's phenomenal. People come up to me kind of like almost like Elvis Presley when I go to Alabama games. They swarm around me and they go, "What was Coach Bryant like? What was he like?" And I tell them, I said, "My gosh, Coach Bryant had a presence that you wouldn't believe." Joe Namath tells this story. Kenny Stabler told it before. Rest in peace, Kenny Stabler. But we all have common relationship because we all played for Coach Bryant. And we all say the same thing. Coach Bryant had an incredible presence. He would walk into a room, a banquet room with like 500 people in it, and it would go dead quiet. When he walked into the room, everybody go, "There's Coach Bryant. There's Coach Bryant." And Coach Bryant would just walk in and everything would settle down. I remember playing Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl in 1977, and we had a Friday night it turned out to be a big pep rally because Ohio State had great following. So did Alabama, but it just seemed to have a lot of Ohio State fans. So they were chanting Ohio State, and they introduced, the football team, and they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're chanting. And they introduced Woody Hayes, the head coach, and they cheer him and stuff. Then they go, "Okay, let's introduce the Alabama Crimson Tide." And you hear boos and all this. And they said, "Now here's the head coach of the University of Alabama, Coach Paul Bear Bryant." Place went quiet. There was no disrespect. There was this incredible respect that Coach Bryant commanded, and so did Don Shula. It was just an awesome experience. It was like, that I could take away that only the players felt that I played with. We had that experience together that, yeah, I remember being with Coach Bryant. It scared the death out of you. Ray Perkins talked about it. He became the head coach of the New York Giants and in Alabama. He says the biggest thing I feared was disappointing Coach Bryant. I asked him, I said, "You were the head coach of the New York Giants, and Coach Bryant called you up and asked you in 1983, Coach Bryant, basically, it was 82, I think, 80 was the end of 83. Coach Bryant had determined that he didn't want to coach anymore. He couldn't recruit. So he said, "I'm not a good coach anymore." He calls Ray Perkins in. Ray Perkins quits the New York Giants, and becomes the head coach at Alabama. And I remember walking into Ray, and I said, "Ray, I got to ask you." I said, "You were the head coach. You quit." Experiences are just phenomenal. And to play for, Coach Shula, he won the Super. I mean, went 17-0. And, Coach Shula, I had my father-in-law in North Carolina. Funny story, and it's really cool. This really warms my heart. I'm going to share it with you, is that I just wanted Coach Shula to know who I was. And, little old Barry Krauss from Pompano Beach, Florida, bean picker, And so my father-in-law was, it was about a year or so ago, and he was in North Carolina. He was in a restaurant, a club actually, and Coach Shula was there. And Coach Shula physically can't walk anymore. He's in a wheelchair. And so he decided to walk over and introduce himself to Coach Shula. And he said, "Hi, my name's George Petway, and you don't know who I am, but my son-in-law, Barry Krauss, played for you." And he said, he leaned back, he goes, "Barry Krauss, number 55. He goes, "My best linebacker ever." And I was like, he said that? And he said, "Yes, he did. He knew who you were." And I was like, I got it. I'm done. I can end the life now, man. He knew who I was, and I got to play for him.
That's great. That's a fantastic story. So, Barry, it's always a pleasure to see you. I didn't realize how much I missed you until we did this tonight, and it's going to be a shame if I'm not talking to you at least every other month from now on.
I'd like to.
When the season hits here, we'll go out and get some dinner when you come into town and stay for a few days. So make sure you
Chattanooga too.
What's that?
And I bet we could get you down to Chattanooga too.
Yeah, I got to go to Chattanooga to visit you as well.
The Chattanooga Choo Choo.
That's right. Yeah. Pardon me, Roy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you too, Zoop. First off, Alex, thank you for putting this on. John, thank you very much. Zoop, it's great seeing you, and it is about reconnecting with relationships. And I would love to be able to touch base with you a little bit more often, but you mean a lot to me, brother. You mean a lot to me, and more than you would ever even think about. But it's great to see you, and great that that you're doing well. And please give my love to Carrie.
I will do that. All right, and you
She's a
give
wonderful woman.
give your best to my friend. If she's gonna, not when she dies, she's going straight to heaven. No,
Yeah, man.
no funeral, no nothing. Just like that for putting up with me.
Yeah.
So, Alex, John, thanks for getting everything together. Barry, love you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Zoop.
Take care. Good night.
Good night.